This is the audio for a post on the Movements in America Substack. Check out the website at movementsinamerica.substack.com. Link is in the description. What I wish I knew 5 years ago. My last post was a reflection of the 3.5 years of ministry I had in Houston. That time was characterized by a lot of learning through failing, seeking the Lord with brothers and sisters, and a willingness to try new things. After Houston, I moved back to Raleigh-Durham, RDU, just over 5 years ago, and I've had the opportunity to implement much of what I learned during that time. Looking back on my time in RDU, I don't see as many glaring mistakes to fix like I did when I was in Houston. By God's grace, we've come a long way over the last 5 years. We've now seen fourth-generation churches, a classic milestone in movement work. It's a good discipline to pause every so often to reflect on what the Lord has done, to take stock, and to distill some of the lessons He's taught. That's what I hope to do in this post. My prayer is that it encourages and equips you in your own journey of making disciples who make disciples. Biblical leadership development. Just before I left Houston, I was coaching two men who had planted healthy, growing churches. I was excited to help them take the next step, raising up leaders who could multiply more churches. But when I began explaining how to develop leaders, they looked at me like I was speaking another language. I tried everything, walking them through scripture, telling stories, giving practical ideas, but nothing landed. Weeks went by, still no traction, no multiplication. Eventually, I did what I've learned to do in moments like that. I looked in the mirror. As I looked at my methods, I realized something painfully obvious. I had a major gap in my training approach. For years, we emphasized that for gospel sharing, disciple making, and church planting, the tools had to be simple, biblical, and reproducible if we wanted it to multiply. However, when it came to leadership development and coaching, we always said that it could be done intuitively and based on personality. That realization hit like a slap in the face. We were multiplying gospel sharers and even some disciples, but we weren't multiplying leaders. That was a huge miss. I had to come to terms with the fact that we were wrong about our coaching practices. As I road tripped back to North Carolina, I made a firm decision. I was going to create or find a leadership development process that was just as simple and reproducible as our other tools. I asked every leader I could find what they did for coaching. Most, like me, had no clear model, just instincts. A few had systems I could experiment with in RDU. When I began using those methods with new leaders, they kind of understood more than my Houston guys did, but they still couldn't replicate it. Then about 18 months after moving to RDU, I attended a mid-level training. Our table assignment was to study how Jesus in the early church identified, developed, and sent leaders. That was my eureka moment. Identify, develop, send. It was so obvious once I saw it. We already had simple biblical tools that explained how to do each of those things. Right there in the training room, I sketched out what would become our leadership development pathway. Since then, it's become second nature for our leaders. It's the clearest and most effective leadership development process I've ever used. Maybe there is a simpler method out there, but I haven't found it yet. I've dropped links to the videos and studies that elaborate on the pathway in the Substack post. If you'd like me to go deeper on this in another post, let me know in the comments. Elder development. In my previous post, I mentioned how apostolic leaders, like myself, often remain the de facto leaders of churches long-term, even though Scripture calls for elders, shepherds, and teachers to be the primary leaders of the church if it is to sustain over time. When proper elders get appointed to lead churches, missional leaders can then catalyze new work in new places while speaking back into existing churches to strengthen and encourage them. Through walking out the one another commands from the Bible, we've begun to see gifted shepherds and teachers rise up and stick in the work. These leaders are still on mission, still sharing the gospel, and still committed to multiplication, but they gravitate toward the discipleship and community-building aspects of movement work. This has been a massive blessing. However, we quickly realized we didn't have much in place to train these kinds of leaders. We had tools for going out, but we lacked processes for going deep. Much of our gathering life was still driven by intuition rather than focused equipping. We began experimenting with studies, tools, and intentional rhythms to help these elders lead churches into greater spiritual depth while staying on mission. It's still very much a work in progress, but I honestly wish we had started this years ago. As we've invested in elders, our outward-focused leaders have been freed up to catalyze even more multiplication. I don't have any tools to post about in regards to this training, but I do have one key insight. Most of the challenges in our churches are shepherding issues, not teaching issues. We deal far more with marriage struggles, unresolved conflict, heart-level issues, mental health, immaturity, and grief than we do with doctrinal error. This has profoundly shaped how we think about elder development. If you're interested in a post specifically about elder development in movements in America, just drop a comment and I'll make it happen. Church of Churches. When I first moved back to RDU, I didn't expect to start a church right away. But within 3 months, I met a brother who could gather people, so we launched one together. He was completely new to this and had a lot of questions. But in our first coaching meeting, I raised the bar even further. I told him we weren't planting just a church, we were starting a network of churches. His eyes went wide. See, in Houston, every new church we planted was treated as independent. We thought that would increase ownership and speed up multiplication. But over time, each church was small, isolated, and weak. No one gathering had the full range of spiritual gifts. They lacked connection, mutual encouragement, and a sense of being part of something bigger. Then we looked at the New Testament again and recognized that we needed to be a church of churches. In 1 Thessalonians 1, Paul addresses the church of the Thessalonians, the whole body of believers in the city, not just a single house church. Most of Paul's letters follow that same pattern. Romans, Philippians, Colossians. One church in one city. So we asked, how did the early churches relate across a city or even a region? We found examples of giving, shared leadership, correction, mission, and more happening between churches. So we applied that. We gave our network a shared name, held joint gatherings, and committed to doing life and mission together. We also connected with other networks in our city to support and sharpen one another. Being a church of churches has been far more fruitful and sustainable than trying to multiply isolated gatherings. You don't have to comment about this one. I'll definitely be writing more about it in the future. Networking or just making friends? In Houston, we trained thousands of believers and connected with hundreds of pastors. At first, we approached those pastors with offers of training, but that rarely went anywhere. The only churches we really trained came through relational referrals or because they reached out to us. I realized working with established churches wasn't my strength, so when I got to RDU, I didn't pursue it. By God's grace, we saw a fourth-generation church start in our own network, but I was still burdened. Our 7 churches barely made a dent in the 1.5 million lost people in our metro area. In prayer, I sensed the Lord saying, your network isn't enough, but multiple networks working together could be. We were already connected to 2 other movement-focused ministries in the city, but even that wasn't enough. God spoke to my wife and me. We needed to network to find more people to train. We went to talk with our coach, Bill Smith, who immediately tore down our idea.
Roger,
He said,
how would you feel if someone came up to you and asked to train you?
I'd probably be annoyed.
I admitted.
What makes you think they wouldn't be annoyed? Why don't you just try to be their friend? Not a lot of missionaries have friends, and that's probably something they actually want.
We've had multiple similar conversations as Bill tried to reframe my mindset. Months later, I had finally committed to making friends, but I still wanted to know from Bill how to find people to train. He told me to think about what friends do.
When friends get together, they talk about what's been going on. You share about your ministry, I share about mine. If I bring up an idea that resonates with you, you'll run with it. If you do the same, I might ask to learn more. That's how real collaboration begins. If you talk about your ministry with your friends, they will ask for training and coaching if they want it.
That clicked. Almost every movement leader I know was trained through relationships or because they sought out training themselves, not because they got random offers from strangers. I decided to focus on just befriending people and see what God did. Something beautiful happened. I began meeting people who were already interested in DMM and wanted to connect. I didn't offer training. I just tried to be a brother. We encouraged each other, prayed for each other, shared stories, and sharpened one another. As trust grew, collaboration followed. After this, we helped each other like friends do. I've had requests to help with training, and I've asked others to help us in areas where we need it. I have connected disciple makers to others who they could team up with, and I've had them introduce me to other missionaries too. This has led to a growing coalition of relationships that mutually support one another as we try to multiply disciples in churches. The deeper the friendship, the more we collaborate together. Here's helpful framework I've used. Connect, communicate, collaborate. Start with connecting relationally. Communicate about what God's doing. If the Spirit leads, collaborate together. This is the same for all of you listeners. Everything I'm doing, I have either learned from studying Scripture with friends or from the stories that my friends have shared with me. Please comment your thoughts or message me. I would love to hear from you. These are some of the biggest lessons I've learned over the last 5 years. I'm still learning, especially in the area of networking by friendship. And I expect the next 5 years will bring even more growth. I just pray that when I look back then, I'll be able to say that we're further along than we are now. Thanks for listening. Be sure to pick up my book, Movements in America, on Amazon if you want to learn more about how God is multiplying disciples in churches around the United States. The link is in the description.